All right, hey everyone, it's Coop here. We're starting something obviously really new for our campaign today, which is a virtual town hall where I'm going to open myself up to questions from everyone out there who's watching or who's given us questions before on Facebook or any mechanism, and I'm going to answer them. I'm going to answer them live and in person in the flesh. This is Coop. Uh, I want to start by talking about exactly, what our campaign's doing right now. Our campaign is doing a lot of really great things. We're bringing a progressive vision to Douglas County and the criminal justice system here. And a big part of that is starting a conversation about criminal justice. And I really firmly believe that in order for our system to truly change and start making our community safer, our leaders have to be comfortable talking about the difficult things in our community and having those difficult conversations. And so this live feed is an opportunity for you, everybody out there who's watching, to ask me questions, ask me whatever you want. They can be questions about the criminal justice system. They can be questions about me personally. They can be questions about our campaign. Anything, nothing's off limits, no holds barred. I want to encourage everybody first, before I start though, to go to our website, which is, of course, votecoop.com. Okay, you can learn everything about our campaign there, including our platform, the progressive prosecutor platform that we're running. You can learn about me. You can learn about the cool events that we're having, and you can also purchase some Coop swag in this fine Coop tee. That's right. That's a Coop pocket tee that we're selling on our website here in the next couple of days. You can see it's got the fine pocket there for you to put anything in that pocket, whatever you want. I prefer a pocket constitution actually, because I prefer to have that on me at all times. It helps as an attorney to have that. And you also see the hashtag Vote Coop on the back. These t-shirts are selling like hotcakes. You got to get one. Everybody has them. Everybody's wearing them. They're really popular. You're going to see them everywhere, all over Douglas County. I actually have I'm not ashamed to say that I have my Coop tee on right now as I'm answering these questions for you all. So go to our website, send us a message if you want to. We'll get you a Coop tee. We have all sorts of Coop swag. Everybody's going to be wearing it. It's great. So, well, let's start the questions. And like I said, this is an opportunity for people to ask questions. So we had a couple of questions that were sent in to us beforehand that I'm going to start with answering. And then if everybody that's watching this wants to send a question over in the comments, I can answer those as well. Like I said, this is an opportunity for us to have a conversation about criminal justice and about what needs to change in Douglas County and all across the country. So I'm going to start with a couple of questions that I got specifically about my role as a defense attorney and how being a defense attorney, how that kind of translates into being a prosecutor. Specifically, one question that we got: how does your experience as a defense attorney translate to a prosecutorial role? Well, this question is something I get asked a lot. Obviously, my role right now is, and what I've done for my entire career is, I'm a criminal defense attorney. And in that role, I do one thing, and that's advocate and defend clients accused of crimes. In that role, I've really become intimately familiar with our criminal justice system, both all over the state of Kansas and specifically right here in Douglas County. And from that role, I've learned just what our criminal justice system can do to people who don't have the resources and don't have the ability to defend themselves. I've seen how that interacts with people, and what can happen when our criminal justice system runs amok, and it can destroy lives. My role as a defense attorney is very specific. I defend people accused of crimes. The Constitution guarantees everybody charged with a crime a zealous defense, and I'm proud of the defense that I run for my clients, because if I don't do it, nobody else will. And it's a very specific role, and it's one that I value very much in our criminal justice system. How that translates to being a prosecutor is that I only know how to fight with my back up against the wall. That's all I do as a defense attorney right now. And as a prosecutor, the way that I defend and I advocate for victims in our system is going to be no different than the way that I defend and advocate for my clients right now, because that's the only thing I know how to do, is advocate for people. And when I talk about advocate people, I talk about advocating for people in the system who are need to be able to tell their stories. We see so often in our criminal justice system people that are unable to tell their stories, whether it's because DAs are afraid to charge cases because they're afraid of the political ramifications. DAs are afraid to fully investigate cases because they're afraid of, they're more concerned about how, dollars are being used as opposed to actually advocating for victims and survivors. And as a defense attorney, I don't worry about that kind of stuff. I only know how to do one thing, and that's advocate. I fight with my back against the wall every day. And as Douglas County DA, it will be no different. And I think what's most important is that I've seen what our criminal justice system is capable of here in Douglas County. I've seen the poor single moms who have been arrested for possession of marijuana, who have been thrown in jail, who have had their kids taken away from them because they're medicinally using marijuana. And I've seen a DA that's been complicit in that. I've seen a DA that's disconnected from the actual people that are in the criminal justice system. And I've seen that what they're focused on right now is convictions and not compassion. Every person's treated like a number and not an actual person. As a criminal defense attorney, I've been side by side with my clients as they've gone to court, not knowing what sentence they're going to get, knowing what's going to happen to their family when they go to jail. And so I've used that, and I have that experience, and I look forward to using that experience in transforming our criminal justice system that we have in Douglas County and making it a system that actually values humans over numbers. So I think my experience as a defense attorney translates perfectly to being a prosecutor, because right now I defend my clients, and when I'm the prosecutor in Douglas County, the chief prosecutor, I will defend survivors and victims in the system, and I will create a system in Douglas County that we can be proud of. So that was a great question. And I do want to say, going back to the Coop teas, that the best question today that gets asked, and it's completely subjective and arbitrary, I get to decide what the best question is, unfortunately, but the best question that's asked will get a free Coop tea. So keep asking those questions, because these Coop teas they're going fast, so we might not have a whole lot more here pretty soon. So that was a great question. So along those same lines, here's another question. And this one's probably a two-part question. Let me see here. Man, that's a good question. Here we go. Your platform champions a very different approach to criminal prosecution. Thank you, whoever's asking this question. How will you implement that vision, and especially how do you instill that among others in the DA's office? I get asked this question a lot too, because what people want to know is the progressive prosecutor platform, which is a platform that I firmly believe in. It's one that's worked all across this country to stem the tide of mass incarceration. People want to know how that platform is specifically implemented as a DA. And what I say is that we have all the tools in place right now. We just need somebody in charge in that DA's office who's willing to do these things. We need somebody who's willing to step up and say, yeah, our system is broken and it could be better, and we need to fix it as a community. We have resources available in our community. We have all sorts of fine nonprofits and mental health facilities and workers and people that are dedicated activists and advocates for people in the criminal justice system. And what I plan to do as DA is bring all those people in and bring them to the table and find those stakeholders and let them have a voice in how I prosecute cases in Douglas County. It's not about just prosecuting cases just to get convictions. We've seen what that leads to. We've seen that leads to a criminal justice system that's comfortable putting people in prison and warehousing them. We've seen that leads to an increase in the rate of incarceration in this country of 400% over the last 40 years. Over 2 million people currently incarcerated in this country. That win at all costs, get convictions mentality, that doesn't keep our community any safer. So I want to keep our community safe by keeping our community intact, not taking a dad away from his kids, not taking a mom away from her kids because they couldn't pay some fines and then, they decided to drive to the store to get groceries. I'm not interested in putting those people in jail, and our community's not interested in putting those people in jail. What we want to do is keep those people out with their families. We don't want to put people in jail who are addicted to drugs or have mental health issues. Right now in the Douglas County Jail, there's probably at least 50% of those people who either have, and probably much more than this, who either have a substance abuse issue or a mental health issue. My interest is not putting those folks in jail. That ruins families when we do that. And by bringing stakeholders in the community through the great community programs that we have and the hardworking advocates that we have in this community, I'm going to bring them to the table in how I prosecute cases in Douglas County. That's how I'm going to implement my vision. I'm not going to do it alone. I can't do it by myself. I need all of those groups here in Douglas County to help me do it. But I can tell you that I am willing to bring them in because I don't know everything. And we need a DA to admit that you can either be part of the problem or you can be part of the solution. And right now our DA is part of the problem because he's unwilling to bring these people in and really have these difficult conversations. And that's what I plan on doing as DA, bringing those stakeholders to the table so we can talk about mental health, we can talk about ending the war on drugs, and we can make our community safer. So that was another great question. That one's in the running, I think, for best question of the day, possibly getting a free Coop tea. We'll see if there's any more that come along. So I got a question here coming through. We're going to switch over to the live feed. And this one's specifically about mental health and drug treatment for individuals in the jail. People wait in jail for treatment, both mental and drug and alcohol. Is there something you could do to address this? And that's a great question, Sherilyn, I see coming through on the comments. Yeah, there's something I can do to address this, and that's called not putting people in jail who have mental health and substance abuse issues. Like I said, we have a massive percentage of people incarcerated in our local jail here in Douglas County and all across the country who are in there simply because they're not getting the adequate access to the resources in our community to deal with their substance abuse issues or their mental health issues. So let's talk about substance abuse issues. We know our criminal justice system, how it's dealt with drugs over the last 30 years. We fought a failed war on drugs in this country that has led to mass incarceration. It's led to not just mass incarceration of people in our community, but specific parts of our population here in community, in the country. I mean, we've seen that in the United States alone, an African American male is 4 times more likely to be arrested for a marijuana-related offense than a white male. And that's while white males and African American males are known to use marijuana at the same rate. That's a grossly disproportionate number. So that shows that not only is the war on drugs a failure because financially, economically, it's cost us trillions of dollars, but it's a failure because it's destabilized entire communities because it's racist. And so my first step as DA in Douglas County is to end the failed war on drugs right here at home, because we do have people going to jail for drugs right now. And the way that I'm going to do that is every case I see that's drug related, I will devote resources into deflecting and diverting that case away, not just from the jails, but from the criminal justice system as a whole. The criminal justice system does not deal with drug treatment well. It's a hammer, it's a blunt object that doesn't help people kick their addictions. What I want to do is, before I even charge a drug case, I want to explore substance abuse treatment for those individuals. I want to explore any and all possible alternatives to ensure that that individual doesn't even get charged. Because what we know in the criminal justice system is that simply by very nature of being arrested and charged with an offense, people are more likely to be repeat offenders in the criminal justice system. The criminal justice system traumatizes people to the extent that it's difficult for them to break away. So my goal as DA is to not even bring people into the court system and to divert them before they even get charged. Secondly, I will create a diversion program. Diversions for all drug offenses in my office as DA are going to be the rule and not the exception. Now, the ACLU did a study in specifically citing Douglas County in 2017, where Douglas County was found to have one of the lowest felony diversion rates in the state of Kansas. Now, that's not just for violent felonies, that's for all felonies. That study specifically found that if our district attorney, Charles Branson, had utilized his office to divert cases from the criminal justice system at a rate that was proportionate to the national average, it would have saved our county over $165,000 a year. So, hold on a second. That's my Roomba going off. Hold on one second. Let me get that. Okay, Roomba's okay. We need to divert drug cases from the criminal justice system. So I will create a diversion program where people are getting diversions before they're even brought into the court system, and most drug cases will be diverted from our court system. So if you go to court on any given day under my DA's office in Douglas County, you will be hard pressed to find anybody in that court who's there for drugs, because drugs in court don't mix. And people going to court for drugs are more likely to go to jail and more likely to have their addiction not treated. So that's how our approach to ending the war on drugs will function in Douglas County. And then with mental health, it's the same thing. Throughout my campaign, I've had a great opportunity to talk to a lot of people who are key players in the mental health community. And the consistent theme is that we need to develop a system here in Douglas County where our police officers and our law enforcement officers are able to, when they're dealing with somebody who's experiencing a mental health crisis, have some place to take that person other than the jail and other than the emergency room. So one thing that I want to do as DA is I want to explore outside funding for a mental health crisis intervention unit. They have these units in hospitals, but they're most often their own facilities, that they're places that law enforcement officers can take people when they're experiencing mental health crisis, to have them cool off and to have them get through their mental health crisis, as opposed to taking them to jail. That's the first step, in my opinion, to solving the crisis of incarcerating mentally ill people, is knowing that just because somebody's experiencing a mental health crisis doesn't mean that there's somebody who deserves to be in jail. Secondly, our diversion program. Our diversion program will take into account mental health considerations when we're communicating with stakeholders on the outside, to make sure that these people are individuals who can get the help they need without having to come to court and get thrown in jail. So mental health and substance abuse obviously are two key parts of my platform, and it all goes back to finding alternatives to incarceration to decrease our jail population and make our community safer. And that's the progressive vision I have for Douglas County. So, and I think we had another question along the lines of that is, payment and, how individuals are going to pay for these things. Nobody should ever be denied mental health treatment or substance abuse treatment because they can't afford it. Nobody should ever be denied a diversion in Douglas County because they can't afford it. So one of the key steps in my platform is making these things not cost prohibitive. Individuals who want this treatment can get this treatment, and they're not going to have to sacrifice their income in order to do it. So once again, another great question. Also in the running for a free Coop tea. So keep in mind, the more questions that come in, the more chances you have to win a Coop tea. So, all right, let's move on here to another question. Let's see here. And this is one that's actually that I've gotten just recently. This is from Brandy. With the burning of the Haskell graduation teepee this week and the rise of other hate crimes across the country, what do you think can be done in Douglas County to stymie this sort of behavior? Well, obviously what happened at Haskell with the burning of the graduation teepee was a crime. It was criminal conduct. Somebody has now been charged for it. And it's tragic that this sort of thing is still happening in this day and age in our community. In a community like Lawrence, which values progressive values and inclusion. The role of a DA is to keep a community safe. It's the fundamental role of any district attorney. And we can't keep our community safe if we're not acknowledging the deep, deep roots of systemic racism that exists in our criminal justice system. Currently in the Douglas County Jail, and this happens right here in Douglas County right now, 25% of the inmates in the Douglas County Jail roughly are African American. Our population on a whole here in Douglas County, just under 5% are African American. So what we've seen, that disproportion is a striking example of our criminal justice system is fundamentally unfair to people of color. And a DA's responsibility, first and foremost, is to acknowledge that disparity and to acknowledge that for whatever reason, our criminal justice system is engaged in systemic racism to a point that we're incarcerating entire segments of populations right now, and we're destroying people's lives and families. And the first step to combating acts of hate committed based on race is acknowledging the role that systemic racism plays in our criminal justice system. So, as DA, one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to establish an anti-racism task force in my DA's office. And that task force is going to be given the task of investigating racial bias in the way that we prosecute cases in Douglas County, in the way that we police in Douglas County, and the way that our court system interacts with people of color in Douglas County. We don't have anybody right now, any system set up to keep detailed statistics on racial profiling in Douglas County. While we know that a study was done by the city of Lawrence a few years back where at least a strong number of people of color in our community communicated in that study that they had felt in their interactions with law enforcement some sort of racial bias, either implicit or overt racial bias. So we know that exists, whether it's happening intentionally or whether it's subconscious. And so as DA, my role is to make sure that our criminal justice system is acknowledging the role of systemic racism and then doing everything we can to prevent it from leading to wrongful convictions and leading to people being in jail who shouldn't be there. So my anti-racism task force is the first step in doing that. We will bring together, like I said, again, stakeholders from the community, individuals, focusing on, scientific studies, empirical evidence that show that yes, racial bias does exist in our criminal justice system. We'll keep detailed statistics about race when it comes to how crimes are charged, what types of offenses are charged against people of color versus white people, how those crimes are charged, and where exactly those racial biases are existing. We have that conversation, and that's the first step to attempting to eliminate systemic racism from our system. And it's not an easy step, and it will take a lot of work, but the first thing that we need is a progressive prosecutor who knows just how negatively race is used in our criminal justice system. As a defense attorney who's represented multiple minority clients, I've seen how our criminal justice system interacts with them versus my white clients. And I can tell you there is a difference. There's a stark difference, and it's leading to a disproportionate amount of people of color being incarcerated in our nation's prisons and jails. So as your DA, I intend on first and foremost establishing an anti-racism task force, talking about race, using all of the things that we garner from that task force in my decisions to charge offenses, and making sure that we aren't contributing to the problem of systemic racism. Instead, in Douglas County, we need to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So that would lead to, us having conversations about these crimes of racial violence that are occurring, and they are occurring in our community. And we need leaders who are willing to step up and talk about those and have those conversations. So, Brandy, that was a great question. Once again, in the running for a Coop T. It's very close right now between Brandy and Sherilyn for that Coop T. So, okay, here's a question from the kiddos, from Abby, who is 6 years old. Thank you, Abby, for the question. Abby says, kids aren't allowed to do certain things because we realize their minds aren't developed enough, but we sometimes hold them criminally responsible without these same acknowledgments. What can be done to help them reform their behavior but not punish them? Okay, well, that's a great question, Abby. Kids are part of the criminal justice system too. Kids can commit crimes. We know it. Sometimes it's because they don't know any better, but sometimes it's because they do. As a DA, as a prosecutor in Douglas County, I'm not only responsible for, prosecuting crimes against adults, but also crimes, that children commit. And one part of my platform that I'm really passionate about, and one thing that I really think any prosecutor needs to do, is acknowledge that kids are kids and adults are adults, and that kids should be treated differently in our criminal justice system. And we have a juvenile system for a reason. And that juvenile system is focused, or it should be focused on making sure that we're understanding the difference between a child's brain and an adult's brain when it comes to decisions that are made in criminal cases. So first and foremost, I think if you're a child and you commit a crime, that you should be prosecuted as a child and not as an adult. I'm gonna oppose any action. My prosecutors aren't gonna be waiving in Kansas. We can charge children as adults, and we can say, well, we're charging them as adult. But the problem is that those children are facing it very much adult punishments, though their actions probably were those of a child. So I'm going to oppose waiving children up to adult status as a prosecutor. Juveniles are going to be prosecuted as juveniles. They're going to be treated as kids in our system. Now, we can make it, our number one goal needs to be with those kids to make sure that they're not back in our system, that they're done with the system, and that they can have full lives and they can valuably contribute to society. So charging them as an adult and throwing them in prison, that's not the solution. The next thing that I want to do, with my juvenile cases is really focus on individualized prosecution for these kids. I'm not, detention and throwing kids in jail in our juvenile system. It's been proven not to work. It's been proven to lead to kids actually committing crimes in the future. So as a DA, one of the policies that I'm going to have is if a kid's charged with a crime, unless it can be proven that they're a true danger to themselves or others in the community, they're going to be staying in school. They're going to be staying with their family. They're not going to be going to the juvenile correction center. We're going to be working with them and their family to make sure that they can keep going to school and that they're great. They can keep getting good grades and being with their friends and staying in the community as opposed to, putting them in the jail. I think that will make them ultimately more likely to succeed in the future. So we're going to treat kids as kids in our criminal justice system because that's what they are. And we're going to acknowledge that their brains work differently and that, they need to be treated as such. So, Abby, that's a great question. And I think that's actually now number one question that we've gotten. So, Abby, you're in the running for a Coop tee, unless somebody else steps up. So send us over your size and we'll get you one. Let's see. Our next question is about police accountability and transparency. So, I work in the criminal justice system right now. I work with a lot of police officers, and it is true that the majority of the police officers that I work with are dedicated, hardworking individuals who are committed to making the community safe, and that they're what they do for our community should never be undervalued. They're valuable contributors to the safety of our community, and the majority of them do the right thing and want to work hard for their community. But I get questions a lot about things like police accountability and transparency. I think there's a perception out there that, law enforcement and that, prosecutors in conjunction with law enforcement, they, in order, for whatever reason, to preserve the integrity of investigations or to kind of, shield things from the public, that there's a lack of transparency and a lack of open discourse between the public and law enforcement and prosecutors. And the only people that suffer in that are these good cops who are just wanting to do the right thing. They're the ones really that are suffering from that. And the community as a whole suffers because they're not getting all the answers about really critical things as members of the community. So this question specifically is, do you feel like a lack of police accountability and transparency has led to, growing numbers of police misconduct? And, I don't know specifically what the stats say about, actual acts of police misconduct. I do know that if we're not willing to talk about these things openly and in the public, the community can't get the full picture. And people like those folks who are out there listening right now can't really see, what's really going on. And so as DA, I feel like one of my most important roles is going to be to foster an open dialogue between my office and the community. And, bringing people from the community, everyday folks, into our system to see exactly what we're doing, see how we're prosecuting cases, to see how law enforcement's investigating cases. Because without that open line of discourse, there is growing distrust. There are people that are, for rightly or wrongly, thinking that, maybe our law enforcement officers aren't, being 100% truthful in how they investigate cases. And I never want to see that happen because as a DA, it's a disservice to those who are victims and survivors in our system if an investigation in a criminal case is not done 100% above board. Because if we don't have confidence in the convictions that our prosecutors are obtaining in Douglas County, those convictions are obtained on behalf of y'all. Those are convictions obtained on behalf of the citizens of Douglas County. And every citizen deserves, and every person in Douglas County deserves to know our convictions are obtained with integrity and openness and honesty. And so my policy as DA is first and foremost when it comes to how we prosecute cases. Anytime I charge somebody with an offense, even before I charge them with an offense, I'm not going to be hiding the ball. Okay. Everybody charged with a crime deserves to know what evidence the state has against them. That's a fundamental aspect of our Constitution, and it's something that I really value. And I know exactly how important it is as a defense attorney. And so from the very beginning, as soon as somebody's arrested, I will make sure that they have access to the evidence that we have against them. That's called an open file policy, and that's a true open file policy. That's a policy my office will have in writing that will say that as soon as you're arrested in Douglas County and my office is in charge of prosecuting you, we're not going to hide the ball. We're going to give you all of the evidence we have against you. We're going to give you quick and thorough access to it, you or your attorney, so you can make informed decisions about your case. That'll speed cases through our criminal justice system. That'll make our cases resolved more efficiently. And that'll also make sure that when cases are resolved, it's because people know the evidence against them. Not because they're being forced into taking pleas, or not because they're being forced to go to trial not knowing what evidence there is against them. So first and foremost, having a clear and having a very open file policy is a key written policy that I will have in my office. And along the same lines of that is, as a prosecutor, I'm responsible for the evidence that I put on at trial. I'm responsible for the witnesses I decide to call. And like I said, it goes back to people in Douglas County deserve to know that convictions are obtained with integrity. And that means these convictions cannot be obtained with false evidence, with false testimony, or through testimony from people who are known to have committed misconduct in the past. So if you're a police officer, or if you're any member of the prosecution team, not just police officers, like I said, the majority of them are good folks doing their job and they don't have issues. But if you do have a misconduct issue, I'm going to maintain a clear, detailed no-call list in my office. That means I will have a list of individuals that will not be called by my office in the prosecution of cases, called as witnesses or their testimony utilized. We have to stop thinking as prosecutors and people in the criminal justice system that our number one role is to obtain convictions. What point is obtaining a conviction if we don't have faith in the integrity of that conviction? We put innocent people in jail in this country. We do. There are innocent people incarcerated right now. There's innocent people in our Douglas County jail. I'm sure of it. And as a prosecutor, you have immense power over if you put an innocent person in jail. You have the most power, and especially as a district attorney. So we need to make sure that when we are convicting individuals and we're having trials, it's all based off of evidence and facts, and that's it. And not off of testimony that comes from officers who have committed misconduct or members of the prosecution team who have. That's what the people of Douglas County deserve. So I will promote transparency in how I prosecute my cases by keeping an open file policy, by keeping a no-call list, and I will invite others in the system to be a part of prosecuting these cases so we know that these convictions, if obtained, are obtained with integrity. That's what the people of Douglas County deserve. So once again, another great question that was from Nick. Let's see here. Looks like, we've got a couple more questions here. We're going to switch back to the live questions. This one's from Sion. Thanks for listening, Sion. Let's see. Would you be willing to create an economic crimes against workers unit to protect workers from being exploited by their employer? This is a question I've gotten frequently, a lot more frequently. And specifically right now, because we do have so many folks out there who, are either unemployed or who are, dealing with limited employment opportunities. And we have to be, as somebody that's prosecuting offenses, we have to constantly be on the lookout for people who are being exploited economically in our community. It is criminal conduct, and it's conduct that once again undermines individuals, and it disproportionately affects poor folks and people of color, and that's economic exploitation. That's things like price gouging. That's things like landlords taking advantage of their tenants and charging exorbitant rent costs. And as a DA, we shouldn't be afraid. We shouldn't shy away from prosecuting those who are in power. We must, prosecute those who are committing crimes and those who are harming our community, whether they have power or influence or not. We've seen a couple notable examples, recently of individuals, nationally who, just by the very nature of them having a lot of money, they get out of jail, and and they get leniency in their sentences, and they get special deals from prosecutors. I have a lot of clients right now who are incarcerated in Kansas. I have clients up in Lansing where, over last check, over 700 inmates have tested positive for COVID. And I have clients who have tested positive up there. And, they would sure love to be able to have a bunch of money to pay their way out of prison. But of course they don't. And if they did, they probably wouldn't be in there in the first place. And that is a huge problem in our criminal justice system, is the disparity that we treat people with wealth versus poor folks. Quite frankly, our criminal justice system criminalizes poverty, and it's done that for quite some time. If you're in jail, in a local county jail, including right here in Douglas County, most likely you haven't been convicted of anything yet. Jails aren't places where people who have been convicted of things go. Instead, you're there most likely because you can't afford to buy your way out. So we need to decriminalize poverty in our criminal justice system. And as your DA, the first initiative that I will establish to do that is I will eliminate the use of cash bail in Douglas County. We've seen all across the country movements by progressive prosecutors to eliminate cash bail, because what we've seen is that, quite frankly, the cash bail system as we know it, it doesn't work. It doesn't keep communities safer. It's not more likely to help people show up to court. And really all it does is it punishes you for not having a whole lot of money. It makes it so you have to stay in jail while your case is pending because you can't afford to buy your way out. Cash bail, it has immense social costs for communities. If an individual is incarcerated pre-trial, they're likely to lose their job, they're likely to lose their house, and their family members are likely to suffer without them having even been convicted of a crime. And so as your DA, my first role will be to eliminate cash bail in Douglas County. And I propose to do that. It's quite simple. If my prosecutors are going to court, we will take a default position that because people haven't been convicted of crimes, and because unless they're a verifiable high danger risk to the community, and that's proven, and my prosecutors can prove that, we'll take a default position that people are to be released pre-trial on their own recognizance, meaning that they're going to be released and they're going to be given a court date and they're going to be told to show up. And now what that'll do is that'll greatly lessen the amount of people that are in our jail currently. That'll take people out of our jail and it'll put them back into the community. And it's been proven, multiple studies have been done nationwide to show that when people are outside of jail pending trial, they're much more likely to be successful going forward. They're much more likely to be able to maintain employment and maintain a relationship with their family. Those are all factors that affect people's recidivism, meaning that affect their likelihood to commit crimes in the future. If they're out of jail and they're with their community and with their family working, they're a lot less likely to get back in trouble. And so we'll take a default position that we're going to ask for OR bonds for individuals in Douglas County, unless there can be a proof and that's established that that individual is a danger to the community at large. We'll also make sure that we're not prosecuting people just because they can't pay fines or just because they can't pay money. We see so often, and unfortunately there's people right now in our jail who are there because they got convicted of a crime and they couldn't pay the fines that went along with that crime. Now, as your DA, I will not prosecute crimes of poverty. I will make sure that we aren't putting people in that jail simply because they can't pay fines, because they can't pay money. I will have that discretion to decide which crimes I charge, and those are ones that we won't charge because we know that that does not make our community safer. It just makes our community more dangerous because we're taking people away from their family and their employment. So we will decriminalize poverty in Douglas County. You're not going to be in that jail because you're too poor to get your way out, and you're not going to be in there because you couldn't pay your fines. We're going to make sure that those people are in the community and that they're keeping our community safe. So going back to Sion's original question, yes, prosecuting crimes against those who are in power is something I will not shy away from as DA. Whether you're a landlord, whether you're a big business owner, whether you're a big political donor, I'm not going to care because people in this community deserve to know that their DA is looking out for them and that they're looking out for everyone in the community and not just those who have a lot of power. And so we're not going to shy away from prosecuting people in positions of power. We're going to treat them just like everyone else because that is how we make a criminal justice system that is fair for all folks. So great question, Sion. I got a little off topic there. I really, the role that money plays in our criminal justice system or, the lack of money people have in our criminal justice system is something I'm very passionate about. And I intend on, working, with people in the community about when I'm DA. So great question. We've got time for a couple more questions. Keep in mind, once again, we're playing for Coop teas right now. These teas are, like I said, they're going like hotcakes. This right here, it's got a pocket on it. Like I said, you can put whatever you want in that pocket. A pocket constitution is what I prefer. We might even be giving away some of those. And then, as you can see, it's got the hashtag Vote Coop on the back. So you can't miss. You can't miss with these teas. I'm wearing one right now. You can see it's got the Coop on the pocket. They're great. Ask a question, get a Coop tea. Ask a good question, get a Coop tea. We've got another question about treatment availability in the community. Like I said, we as DAs need to make sure that we're working with community providers to ensure that people are getting into the treatment they need and that we're not afraid to talk to those politicians and those who are in power to get that treatment and to get those programs established. We have the ability to establish those programs in Douglas County. We just need leaders who are willing to step up and do it, and that's what I plan on doing. So I've got one question here about cost and financial cost of incarceration. This is from Luke. Specifically, it's asking how much Douglas County taxpayers spend each year keeping nonviolent offenders behind bars. The one issue that we've had in Douglas County, obviously, people who have tracked the issue with the jail expansion over the last 3 or 4 years know, is that our county leaders, we've had a big issue with transparency as far as, what the numbers really bear out about how much money we're spending putting people in our local county jail. Because we have county leaders right now who are wanting us as, taxpayers and as people in the community to foot a massive bill financially, millions and millions of dollars to expand the size of our Douglas County jail, while not really being able to provide us with any detailed estimates about, how much money we're spending putting people in jail who don't need to be there right now. So the first step as DA is, and we need a DA right now in Douglas County, and this is something I will do, is a DA that promotes transparency and, research and study into, what's going on with our criminal justice system. Our jail population in Douglas County, since Charles Branson has been DA in this county for the last 15 years, has ballooned. It has gotten so high to unsafe numbers. And this is all happening while we know that crime nationwide and here in Douglas County is decreasing, especially violent crime. It's just decreasing rapidly. So something's going on. Something isn't working that's making us feel like we need to put more folks in jail as opposed to less. And every time we put somebody in that jail, it costs money. It costs people in this county massive amounts of money. Now, like I said, there hasn't been a study done here in Douglas County, but the Vera Institute did a nationwide study a couple years ago, and their study actually included local jails over in Johnson County as part of that study. And in that study, the Vera Institute did national averages of essentially how much it costs per year to incarcerate an individual in a county jail. Now, keep in mind these averages varied a lot depending on the jurisdiction and geographically where these are located. But it was anywhere between on the low end around $50,000 a year to on the high end $130,000 a year. And so in Douglas County, we don't have a specific number, but we know it's at least $50,000 a year. And we also have to look at, the opportunity cost of incarcerating individuals in our jail. So if we average that out to about the amount of people that are in our jail, last I checked this morning, I think there was 148 inmates in our county jail right now. I'm just going to do some quick math here on this, and let's see. So we've got, let's just say on average, it's about $50,000 a year to incarcerate somebody. And we times that by 148, that's 7 million, that's close to $7.5 million just incarcerating those individuals, money spent by our county. Okay, now that fluctuates obviously, depending on how long those individuals are in that jail, but that is a massive amount of money and resources that our community is putting into incarcerating individuals. That's all money that could go to drug treatment programs. That's all money that could go to mental health programs. And that's money that could go to our criminal justice system focusing on alternatives to putting people in that jail. Now, along with those studies about the cost of incarcerating an individual are the cost of how much treating that same individual would cost our county and cost jurisdictions. And it's almost a tenth of as expensive to treat an individual either through substance abuse or mental health treatment as it is to incarcerate them. Jails are never the least expensive alternatives. They're not. Jails are always the most expensive. And we're not just talking about financial costs either. We're talking about social costs as well. We're talking about every time we put somebody in that jail, we've basically given up on them. Okay, we've given up on their ability to be in the community and be, and to contribute to the community. So we're taking them away from their family. We're taking them away from their job and their employer. We're taking them away from their home. And all those things are things that are going away when they get thrown into that jail. So there's the financial cost and there's the opportunity cost. So what we know in Douglas County, the few things we do know, and I go back to the ACLU study that was done just a few years ago. And like I said, that ACLU study firmly established that if our DA, Charles Branson, decided that he wanted to actually divert cases from the criminal justice system, meaning say he sees a case and he decides, you know what, this person doesn't need to be prosecuted. My office doesn't need to mess around with this person. I can take my hands away from this person and I can just let them go about their merry way while still keeping eyes on this person in the criminal justice system. I can divert them away. If Charles Branson had chosen just to divert cases at the national average, not anything higher than the national average, it would save our county $165,000 a year. Okay. Now, and keep in mind that our current budget of the Douglas County Jail right now is the biggest budget our county has, and that's over $2.5 million. And the DA's office is second right now. So if we diverted cases just at the national average, we'd be saving $165,000 a year. I don't know why Charles Branson's office hasn't done this, but I can tell you that my office is going to divert cases at the national average and then more. And we're going to be saving money and we're going to be making our community safer at the same time. So everybody needs to keep in mind the massive financial costs of incarceration. They are huge. And incarceration and mass incarceration, it has social costs as well, and it doesn't keep our community safer. So that's a big thing that my role as DA will be to do, is to save this community money by, acknowledging that we don't need to throw everybody in jail. Okay, so I think we have time for one more question. Looks like we have a couple more that were sent in. And this question is about restorative justice and it's specifically what would a restorative justice program look like in Douglas County? And this is a great question because restorative justice is sort of a huge, sort of hot topic right now in criminal justice because, there's a lot of people out there who are looking for any solutions they can to end mass incarceration, knowing that what we're doing right now obviously isn't working. And restorative justice is a big part of that. And restorative justice in general is the idea that our criminal justice system creates harm. it creates harm for victims. It creates harm for victims' families. It creates harms for suspects and defendants, and it creates harm for the people that are work in the criminal justice system as well. And that it also acknowledges that anytime criminal conduct occurs, you know, the best way to serve our community and ultimately make our community safer going forward isn't just to punish that criminal conduct. I mean, that's a part of it, but it's also to repair the harm caused by that criminal conduct. So, restorative justice looks to repair and restore our community. Um, it's an abstract concept, but there are ways that restorative justice programs can be established in communities, and that those programs have led to safer communities nationally. I've been talking a lot with law enforcement about what law enforcement's role in a restorative justice program would be. And one thing that I've found is that Lawrence would be greatly benefited by having a restorative justice program that brings in law enforcement officers. For example, when they arrest an individual, they want to have the discretion to be able to put, either if that person's somebody that needs to go to jail, put that person in jail. But if that's somebody that they think in their training would benefit from engaging in a restorative justice practice, to divert that person into that restorative justice program. And that program, what we do is we have volunteers from the community, we have volunteers from law enforcement, we have people from the DA's office, defense attorneys. They're all a part of that program, and that program brings those individuals in, and they have a one-on-one conversation with the person they committed the crime against. Now, it's usually for nonviolent offenses and for offenses that can be resolved that way, but we let that conversation play out, and we engage in alternatives to what the traditional criminal justice model is. Does this individual want to get thrown in jail for what they did, or do they want to engage in community service? Do they want to engage in volunteer work? What can they do to specifically restore the harm that they created in the community? We found all across the country that programs like this, because they're giving individuals in the system a sense of ownership over their actions, that they actually lead to, like I said, repairing that harm and decreasing greatly the likelihood of recidivism, meaning that these people are less likely to commit those crimes again or any crimes again. And in Lawrence, what we can do, and what I want to do as DA, is establish that program and start it from my DA's office and work with all members of the criminal justice community in establishing that program. There's funding available. There's national funding available. I've talked to individuals in other communities where they've done the exact same thing. And Lawrence actually has the capability to do this. And we've had programs like this in Lawrence before, but these programs have not gotten off the ground. And that's because we need a DA that's willing to think outside the box when it comes to, how we can benefit people in the community and in our criminal justice system. So we need to think outside of the box and establish restorative justice programs that truly work for everybody involved. And, that's one thing I'm very passionate about, and I really look forward to engaging with community stakeholders about going forward. So restorative justice, that's a great question. Full disclosure, that was from Kelly. That was from my wife. But I'm not ashamed to say that, she provides me with a lot of good material for my campaign. So Kelly, that was a great question. You already have a Coop tee, so you're not going to get one, but okay. So I think we're about time to wrap this up. We've been talking for a while, and I want everybody to be able to get out there and enjoy their Saturday. And so a couple of things. Thank you for everybody out there who listen and ask questions. If my campaign does one thing, it's to start a conversation about criminal justice in Douglas County. That's what we want to do, and we want to be able to have these conversations every weekend. So what I'm going to do is, this is going to be a standing meeting. Every Saturday at 11, I'm going to be trying to do these virtual town halls. Everybody can hop on, send us their questions, talk to us about whatever they want to talk about. And what you can do right now, though, is you can go to Vote Coop. As you see, it's votecoop.com. Okay. It's our really fancy website. You can click on things on it. You can go to links. You can learn about my platform. You can learn about what we're doing. And you can also get what is it? It's a Coop tee. See, these are Coop tees. We're also in the process of making Coop tanks. We'll see how the Coop tees sell. If the Coop tees sell, then Coop tanks will be next. Summertime's coming. Everybody's going to want a good tank to wear. And then, as you can see also, it's got the nice, stylish Vote Coop hashtag on the back. So I encourage everybody. We'll be selling these on our website. The suggested donation is going to be $20, and they're going to be just really popular. Everybody's going to be wearing one, so don't miss out. You don't want to be left out. You want to have a Coop tee. So, all right, well, everyone, I thank everybody so much for joining us. Like I said, we're going to be trying to do this every Saturday. If you have any more questions, you can feel free to reach out to me directly, DM me, tweet at me, Instagram, anywhere. We're always available to talk. Remember to get out there and register to vote. The primary election's August 4th. You got to register as a Democrat and sign up to get a mail-in ballot too. We have a link on our website to sign up and get a mail-in ballot. Everybody can vote by mail if they want to, but you got to register and you got to get that link. So go to votecoop.com, go to our Facebook page, like what we have. Thanks everybody, and we'll be back next weekend to do the same thing. Thanks.